In 1965, a team of professional archaeologists in Scotland deliberately buried a 5,000-year-old carved stone under a meter of soil. When asked why, they said it was for protection. They never came back. In 2011, the Supreme Court of India ordered 6 ancient vaults opened beneath the world's richest temple. 5 were opened. The 6th stopped every committee that tried. And right now, in tunnels beneath the Egyptian desert, there are 24 stone boxes, each weighing up to 100 tons, found completely empty. No remains, no explanation for what was ever inside. These are ancient objects that experts, sometimes very, very quietly, have warned people not to study. In Denisova Cave, southern Siberia, researchers have been piecing together evidence of a species of human nobody knew existed until 2010. The Denisovans, from 40,000 years ago. We have almost nothing physical. A few teeth, finger bone, a jaw fragment. What we do have, though, is a bracelet. Green chlorite stone polished to a near mirror finish. And inside the central hole, which is perfectly round, there's evidence of high-speed rotary drilling, a technique that wasn't supposed to exist for another 30,000 years. The team that first published on it noted the workmanship was, and I'm quoting here, consistent with 21st century technology. Now, that's not an explanation. That's just a very careful scientific way of saying they don't have an explanation. More than 130 of these have been found across Europe. Small, hollow bronze objects, 12-sided, with circular holes of varying sizes in each face and a tiny sphere at each corner. They date to roughly the 1st through 5th centuries AD, found at Roman-era sites across France, Germany, Switzerland, Hungary, and Britain. Here's what's actually unsettling about them. Not a single Roman text mentions them. Nothing. In all of classical Roman literature, engineering manuals, census records, military dispatches, private letters, there is not one reference to what these things were. They've never been found in Rome itself, only in the provincial north. Over 50 competing theories have been proposed, but none have achieved consensus. The silence in the historical record isn't a gap. It looks more like a choice. Whether you believe it or not, that's pretty bizarre. In 1986, construction workers in Sichuan province, China, accidentally broke through the ground into 2 massive ritual pits nobody knew existed. Inside were bronze masks, gold objects, and ivory belonging to a Bronze Age civilization not recorded anywhere in Chinese history. The Sangshidu culture, around 3,000 to 4,000 years old. The faces on the masks don't look like anything in known Chinese archaeology. Huge eyes with pupils extended on bronze stalks, some projecting nearly 16 centimeters out of the face. Enormous wing-like ears. No connection to the mythology of any neighboring civilization. In 2021, 4 more pits were discovered and formally rewrote China's Bronze Age history. The Chinese government has tightly restricted independent research at the site from the beginning. What the masks represent, what ritual they were a part of, and what happened to this civilization is officially undetermined. Around 7,000 years ago, a civilization we call the Ubaid culture existed in what is now southern Iraq. They built the first temples in Mesopotamia. They laid the foundations for what eventually became Sumer and Babylon. Across multiple excavation sites from this period, archaeologists have found figurines. Humanoid, but with features that don't look human. Elongated heads, almond-shaped eyes, long, narrow snouts, some with tails, some appearing to nurse infants. The design is consistent across separate sites, which rules out one artist's style or regional tradition. Mainstream archaeology's explanation is that these represent a deity. No tablet has been found to confirm that, no ritual context, no inscription describing what they are. We just know that the people who built the first cities in human history made these figures consistently, and nobody has ever fully explained why. I mean, I don't know, that's just kind of nuts. The Korlek head, a three-faced carved stone idol found near Corlac Hill in County Cavan, Ireland, dating to around the 1st or 2nd century AD. Three faces, each staring in a different direction, found in a region with centuries of dark folklore attached to it. To the ancient Celts, the head was the seat of the soul. Carved heads like this weren't decorative, they were considered inhabited. But here's the thing. Somewhere between the 10th and 13th centuries, the communities living near this specific object buried it deliberately. Scholars believe they buried it because they believed it was cursed and needed to be put into the ground. It's now at the National Museum of Ireland. The modern legend surrounding it is unverifiable, but the burying? Well, I mean, that's documented. The people who lived alongside this thing for centuries made a decision. What they knew that we don't, well, that's the part that gets pretty unsettling.
There's an enormous slab of granite standing in Blekinge, Sweden. It's 13 feet tall, and it's been sitting in the same spot for over 1,300 years. So what is it? A gravestone? A war memorial? No and no. It was built for one specific reason, to carry a curse. The runes carved into it aren't regular Viking writing either. They're from an older, more ritualistic alphabet that people at the time considered far more powerful. It says the person who carved it hid runes of power inside the stone, and if you mess with it, you're gonna die, and not quickly. You're looking at a slow, treacherous, drawn-out death. There's a story from the 1400s. A farmer wanted the land cleared and decided the stone needed to come down. His plan was to pile wood around the base, heat the granite until it's hot enough, then throw cold water on it so it would crack apart. Well, on the day he tried it, with zero wind in the air, apparently, a sudden gust came out of nowhere, reversed the flames, and burned him alive. The stone didn't have a scratch on it. Well, from that point on, nobody touched the thing. The Glavendrup stone holds the record for the longest runic inscription ever found in Denmark. A woman named Ragnhild had it carved to honor her husband Alle, who was a high-ranking priest or chieftain. The beginning of it is a tribute to him, a proper memorial, but the end of it is something else entirely. It says that anyone who damages the stone or moves it to honor somebody else will become Arger. What does that word mean? Well, to say that Arger is an insult would be a gross understatement. Calling someone Arger in Viking society could be a death sentence, either for the person being called it or the accuser. It basically meant coward. So if you were called this, especially as a man, you had legal grounds to defend your honor to the death. And if you didn't do anything about it, you could basically be demoted to a second-class citizen. Anyone could rob you, attack you, or unalive you, and no one was going to do a thing about it. By carving that word into the stone, Ragnhild was giving the entire community permission to destroy the life of anyone who disrespected this site. And it worked. The stone is still perfectly intact after all this time. The Egja stone is one of the stranger finds in Norway. When archaeologists dug it up, it was face down over a grave. The runes were on the underside, pressed against the dirt, pointing down, of course, at the body beneath it. The text describes a BLOOD sacrifice. It says the stone was never exposed to sunlight and wasn't carved with a regular blade. It was carved with a ritual tool used specifically for magic. And then it tells the dead person to stay where they are, warns the living not to open the grave. Vikings had a real serious fear of draugr, and these were basically said to be zombies that kept the full intelligence of the person they used to be, and not the slow, mindless zombies that we often think of today. A draugr was smart, and more importantly, physically powerful. The belief was that if you didn't seal a grave with the right ritual, the person inside could get back out. The Egja stone may have been that seal. Placing it face down over the body was like locking a vault from the outside, a vault specifically designed to stay locked forever. The Stentoften runestone is similar to the Bjorktorp we talked about at the top. It was found in a field in Sweden and uses almost identical language. Perpetual death and insidious harm to anyone who disturbs the monument. But there's an extra layer to this one. It mentions prophecy and power in a way that strongly suggests the land around it was used for cedar. Cedar was a form of Viking sorcery that most people were genuinely afraid of, not skeptical about, actually frightened by. Involved communicating with spirits, and it was considered so dangerous and strange that even hardened warriors wanted nothing to do with it. It was basically dark witchcraft. When the runestone was found in the 1800s, it was going to be moved to a church for safekeeping. A lot of people just refused to help though, not wanting whatever negative energy that was attached to it to be transferred to them. On the Danish island of Bornholm, archaeologists dug up a burial that had nothing to do with honoring the dead. The body had been brutalized after the person was already gone. Giant boulders stacked on the chest and legs, a heavy wooden stake driven straight through the torso into the ground below. Obviously, they wanted to make sure this person stayed down. As I mentioned before, the Viking fear of the dead rising from their graves was real. This particular person scared everyone so much that dying is not considered a good enough guarantee, so they crushed them with rocks and pinned them to the earth with a stake, just to feel safe at night. These got called vampire burials by modern researchers, and similar burials have been found in other parts of Europe as well.
Deep in a network of tunnels beneath the desert at Saqqara, Egypt, there are 24 massive granite boxes. Each one weighs between 70 and 100 tons, each carved from a single block of Aswan granite. The lids alone weigh up to 27 tons, and they were found, all of them, completely empty. No mummies, no remains, no residue, most without a single inscription. The debate around them is actually where it gets interesting. Engineers who've measured the interior surfaces claim the flatness is beyond what hand tools should be able to produce. Egyptologists say the precision claims are overstated. Both groups have been making the same argument for 30 years and neither has fully settled it. Now, those tunnels are so narrow that getting the boxes in would have required engineering that nobody has replicated. The official position is that there's nothing left to find. That might be right, or it might just be the most convenient possible position to take. In 1887, a farmer in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, uncovered a massive flat rock embedded in the earth, roughly 13 meters by 8 meters, about the size of 3 tennis courts, covered in 90 carved symbols, cup and ring marks, spirals, geometric patterns dating to around 3000 BC. Older than Stonehenge, the largest Bronze Age carved rock in Scotland. In spring 1965, a team of professional archaeologists came to the site, made detailed records, and then buried it, deliberately, under a meter of soil. No public consultation, no warning to the local community. The official reason given was protection from vandalism. It stayed buried for 51 years until 2016, when researchers from the University of Glasgow briefly uncovered it to do a digital scan. Then they also reburied it. It is still down there now. Nobody has said when or whether it will be fully excavated. Protection from vandalism. That's what's on record. Well, I would love to believe that's the whole story, but I don't. In 2011, the Supreme Court of India ordered the inventory of all vaults beneath the Sri Padmanabhaswamy temple. 5 vaults were opened, gold statues, gem-encrusted crowns, thousands of gold coins. The total estimated value has been placed between 22 billion and 1 trillion US dollars, making it the richest known religious institution on Earth. Vault B was not opened. The royal family obtained a Supreme Court injunction specifically to prevent it. The vault door is carved with 2 massive cobras. No handles, no hinges, no visible locking mechanism. Local tradition holds it was sealed using a sound-based ritual whose reversal, if it ever existed, is no longer known. The committee appointed by the Supreme Court, using, and I'm quoting, all possible technological resources, could not open it. The BBC reported in 2011 that the court ruled it should simply just remain shut. A modern court, with full legal authority, decided an ancient sealed room should stay that way. The official reason is religious significance, but here's the thing. They had every legal right to open it and walked away. It could be a total respect for tradition, but that's definitely an unusual thing for a court to decide. When Howard Carter opened King Tut's tomb in 1922, among the gold and the furniture were 2 trumpets, 1 bronze, 1 silver, the oldest playable instruments ever found, silent for over 3,000 years. In April 1939, a BBC researcher named James Tappern played one of them live on radio, heard by an estimated 150 million people. The first time those notes had been heard since ancient Egypt. Within weeks, a fire broke out at the Cairo Museum. Shortly after, Britain declared war on Germany. Egyptian scholars explicitly repeatedly warned the trumpets should never be played again. They are now kept under strict handling protocols. In 2011, during Egypt's political revolution, reports surfaced that a visiting official played them at the museum. Power cuts inside the building followed, chaos outside. Egyptologists declined to comment on any connection, but I'd say it's pretty unsettling to say the least. Timur the Great, one of the most feared conquerors in history. His campaigns were responsible for an estimated 17 million deaths, roughly 5% of the world population at the time. Buried in the Gur-i-Amir mausoleum in Samarkand in 1405, and inside the tomb, an inscription: "Whomever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Soviet archaeologists opened it on June 19th and 20th, 1941. 3 days later, June 22nd, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa. 3 million troops, the largest military land invasion in human history. The invasion had been in planning for months. Coincidence is the obvious answer, but here's the thing. Stalin himself apparently didn't find it quite so straightforward. He ordered Timur's remains returned in November 1942 with full Islamic burial rites, the month after the Battle of Stalingrad, generally considered the turning point of the war. Could be coincidence, could be that Stalin was being politically careful with Soviet Muslim populations. Both are reasonable, but a man who publicly dismantled the church, who didn't believe in curses, quietly putting him back in the ground, and nobody officially connects those two things. I don't know. Are they meddling with things bigger than they're letting on? Well, I guess in this case, they already had.
The rock runestone in Sweden has the longest runic inscription ever found anywhere in the world. For a long time, people assumed it was hero myths, old poetry. Interesting, but nothing more than that. But when researchers really looked into it, what they found was completely different. It's more of a warning. The text talks about the sun disappearing and crops dying, which is what Vikings called Fimbul Winter, brutal, endless winter that they believed would come right before Ragnarok. Basically the end times. And scientists have been able to confirm that right around the time this stone was carved, there was this string of huge volcanic eruptions that went off around the world, and the temperature in Scandinavia had dropped. Yeah, even more than usual. That would have been awful. The sky darkened, crops would have failed, a massive portion of the population starved or froze to death. The people living through it genuinely believed the world was ending because, from where they were standing, kinda was. In Norway, a woman was found buried in a boat. That part is normal. Boat burials were an honorable way to go in Viking culture. What wasn't normal were the large scallop shells that had been jammed into her mouth. Nothing like this exists anywhere else in the Viking record, not even close. The shells didn't seem to be decorative, they were forced in there, and in a lot of ancient cultures, forcibly closing the mouth of a dead person usually meant they were trying to keep them quiet, or stopping the spirit from speaking, or stopping something from getting back in through the body. Because this doesn't match anything else we know from Norse culture, though, nobody's been able to fully explain it. This was either some very rare ritual, or maybe even just a single specific case. The Snølledev stone was found in Denmark, dates back to around the 800s. At first glance, it doesn't look that intense. It's just a rune stone with a short inscription saying it was raised for a man named Gunvalder, who was the son of Hraldr. Pretty standard Viking memorial, but then you notice the symbols carved into it. There's a set of 3 interlocked drinking horns, what people now call the triple horn of Odin. In Norse stories, these horns are tied to the mead of poetry, which is all about wisdom, status, and power. Probably meant the person buried here had some kind of importance. While the stone doesn't actually have a curse written on it, people often treat it like it does. That idea comes from other Viking runestones that did include warnings, mixed with the fact that Odin really wasn't seen as a calm or forgiving god, so over time it's turned into something else. Not just a memorial, but something that feels like it carries some ominous weight. The Sulleby runestone in Sweden doesn't threaten you with death or curses or divine punishment. It goes after something that for a Viking was arguably worse. The inscription says that anyone who breaks the stone will be shunned and dishonored. One of the specific words on the stone is rata, which, similar to Arger, seemed to carry real weight. It's been translated to mean wretch, outcast or warlock. And not warlock in the sense that you'd gain magical powers, more that you'd be considered abnormal, a freak. To understand why this was so important, you have to understand what reputation meant in Viking society. Sure, you had an afterlife with Valhalla, but what was considered super important after you died was your name, what people said about it. Your reputation was your legacy. So being called a rata wasn't just embarrassing, it meant your name would be spoken with contempt. Not just now, but by the generations that came after you. For a warrior, that kind of social death, that was the threat that actually kept them up at night. The Osberg ship burial in Norway is one of the most famous Viking discoveries ever made. Incredibly preserved, beautifully crafted, clearly the resting place of someone of very high status. And somewhere inside the structure of that ship, hidden in a spot where no one would ever see it unless they were actively taking the ship apart, someone carved 2 words into a small piece of wood. Rather than butchering the language, I'll just say the translation, man knows little. It wasn't meant to be read by mourners or visitors. It was a place in a spot that would only be reached by someone disturbing the burial, which means it was left specifically for people like, well, the archaeologists who eventually found it. So this is absolutely nuts. Just a few days back at the time of this recording, an article came out in The Sun about a crazy discovery at the pyramids of Giza, or rather under them. Apparently some researchers are claiming that they have found evidence of this massive hidden city beneath the pyramids. A whole underground network under one of the most famous places on Earth. So using this fancy technology called synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, researchers reportedly found what could be a sprawling city, complete with buildings and maybe even water systems. Now the thing is, not everyone is on board with this discovery. While some are totally hyped about the potential of finding a forgotten city, others think it's just a little too far-fetched. Still, the team behind the find is pushing for more digs to confirm what's beneath the surface. If real, it could totally change what we thought we knew about ancient Egypt, and maybe even the way the pyramids were built. As of right now, though, we'll just have to hold out for more information. In Turkey, archaeologists recently dug up a sarcophagus under the Church of St. Nicholas in Demre. It might just be the tomb of the real St. Nicholas, the guy who eventually became the inspiration for Santa Claus. You heard it here first, folks. Santa's coffin has been found. The real St. Nicholas was a 4th century bishop known for his generosity, especially toward children. He lived in what's now Turkey, and over the centuries his legend morphed into the figure we all know today. There's a fun twist to this story though. Back in the 11th century, some Italian merchants allegedly stole his remains and took them to Italy, claiming them as their own. So for a long time, people weren't sure where the real St. Nicholas ended up. But now, with this sarcophagus find, it looks like we might have actually found the real answer. The sarcophagus is made of limestone and has some cool carvings on it that could tell us more about who he was. This could change the whole story, from the man who gave gifts to kids in secret to the red-suited Santa we all love today. In March of 2025, archaeologists made a huge discovery in Egypt, this time in the ancient necropolis of Abydos. They came across a tomb that's believed to belong to a pharaoh no one knew about until now. The tomb, which is around 3,600 years old, was found about 7 meters underground, or about 23 feet. It had clearly been looted over the years, but what was left behind still gave researchers a lot to work with. Abydos is a pretty famous spot for ancient Egyptian burials, so this tomb is kind of a big deal. It's thought to belong to one of 2 pharaohs who are mentioned in some ancient records, but whose actual tombs have never been found. The archaeologists involved in the discovery said, "We have identified the name on the entrance, but much of the text has been damaged. We believe this is the tomb of one of the lesser-known kings who ruled during a fractured time in Egypt's history." End quote. So the second intermediate period, which this tomb was built, was a time when Egypt was divided and dealing with invaders, so finding this tomb could give them new clues about the politics of that specific time. In early 2025, archaeologists made a pretty wild discovery in the Judean desert. They came across a pyramid-shaped structure that's about 2,200 years old along with a bunch of ancient bronze coins and other artifacts. Pyramid, made from carefully cut stones, was found alongside some items that could shed light on the area's ancient history. Now, this pyramid isn't like the big ones we know in Egypt, of course, but it's still a pretty big deal. Some think it might have been a guard tower, others believe it could have been a tomb marker or a monument. Now, on top of that, they found a bunch of bronze coins dating back to the Hellenistic period, a time when Greek rulers like Antiochus IV Epiphanes were in charge. The coins had his name on them, that's how they knew. Now, the Judean desert isn't exactly known for big pyramids, so it's making researchers really rethink how important this area might have been back then. In 2024, a team of archaeologists came across something pretty incredible in Turkey again, a fully intact ancient Roman bakery. The discovery, which was made in Pompeii, has been getting a lot of attention because it's so well preserved. The bakery, which dates back to around 2,000 years ago, was found with large ovens and grinding tools and bread molds still in place. The team found all sorts of neat stuff like this. There were a bunch of clay baking ovens, and some of the molds still had the imprints of loaves or baked there. It's not every day you come across something this well preserved, so researchers were pretty excited. One of the archaeologists said that this was one of the, quote, best preserved ancient bakeries we've ever discovered. It's like stepping back in time to see how bread was made in the Roman Empire. So when we think of ancient Roman archaeology, it's always, it's the big grand buildings, the colosseums, statues, military stuff as well. That's usually what comes to mind, but this find is pretty cool because it gives us a closer look at just the regular day-to-day life in ancient Rome. People were baking bread, going about their lives, and now, thanks to this find, we can see how they did it all.
These weren't prayers. They were handwritten spells of destruction. Discovered at the sacred site of Acae Solis, modern-day Bath, England, were over 100 lead curse tablets thrown into a Roman temple spring. People would scratch angry, revenge-fueled messages onto these thin sheets, then toss them into the water in hopes that the gods would do their dirty work. One tablet reads, "To the god Solis, I give the person who has stolen my cloak. May he be unable to sleep or eat until it is returned." Others weren't as tame. Some asked for their enemies to be blinded or driven insane. What's even more chilling? Many were written backward or in mirrored Latin, a common method of dark magic to confuse spirits into obeying without question. These weren't petty squabbles. These were the dark side of divine justice in ancient Rome. They didn't just die in chains. They were buried in them. When a Roman-era cemetery was unearthed in York, England, archaeologists expected the usual: burial urns, organized tombs, and respectful interments. What they found instead was horrifying. Over 80 skeletons, many buried face down, some missing limbs or skulls, and at least 11 of them still shackled at the ankles with heavy iron restraints. These weren't soldiers or heroes. They were criminals, slaves, or outcasts, cast into the ground as if their punishment had to follow them into death. Some showed signs of trauma, others evidence of decapitation, suggesting violent ends. Even stranger, the shackles appeared custom forged for human wrists and ankles, meaning someone deliberately designed these for long-term suffering. It is a brutal reminder that Rome's justice didn't end with death. A hand severed not by violence, but by design. While excavating the Roman fort at Vindolanda near Hadrian's Wall, archaeologists found what at first looked like a piece of scrap metal, but upon cleaning it, it revealed itself as a perfect bronze replica of a human hand, life-sized, eerily detailed, and buried deliberately beneath the threshold of a shrine to Jupiter Dolichenes, a god of war and thunder worshipped by Roman soldiers. This wasn't some innocent offering. Scholars believe it may have played a role in blood rituals or protective ceremonies. The way it was buried, facing upward, palm outstretched, suggests a symbolic gesture, possibly welcoming or warding off spirits. Whether it represented sacrifice or protection, the hand's presence still puzzles experts, and many believe it had a far darker function than we'll ever know. Beautiful on the outside, deadly on the inside. Buried in the ash of Mount Vesuvius's wrath, archaeologists archaeologists exploring Pompeii uncovered a deceptively elegant gold ring, but inside the band was a tiny hollow compartment, perfect for storing poison. These so-called venom rings were often used by political assassins or desperate lovers, allowing the wearer to discreetly drop toxins into drinks or food with a subtle flick of the hand. The fact that this ring survived the catastrophic eruption is eerie enough, but the real question is, who wore it? Was it ever used? Or did its owner plan something that nature interrupted? Either way, it's a chilling reminder that beneath the Empire's glamour, betrayal could literally be worn on your finger. Imagine being forced to wear your own ransom note. Among the ruins of ancient Rome, archaeologists found an iron slave collar with an inscription that reads, "I have run away. Hold me. When you return me to my master Zoninus, you will receive a gold coin." It's like a twisted version of a dog tag, except it was worn by a human being, possibly for their entire life. The collar tells a heartbreaking story in just a couple sentences. Not only was the enslaved person expected to live with their captivity, but strangers were openly encouraged to treat them like property for a reward. The emotional and physical weight of that collar makes it one of the most personal and disturbing artifacts ever uncovered in Roman history. 30 skeletons, no records, and no mercy. Underneath the Basilica of St. John in Ephesus, Turkey, Roman-era ruins revealed a pit of bodies. At least 30 men, women, piled on top of each other, some decapitated, others with shattered bones. What's bizarre is the lack of context. No tomb markers, no formal burial, no signs of mourning, just bodies hidden beneath sacred ground. Some scholars believe it was an act of religious persecution, others think it may have been a political purge or even a cultic mass execution. Whatever happened, it wasn't quick and it wasn't sanctioned. This haphazard way the bodies were dumped suggests someone wanted this event forgotten. Instead, it is now one of the most unnerving, unsolved Roman mysteries.
Once again, in March of this year, archaeologists in Egypt made a pretty fascinating discovery, an ancient tomb that's over 3,200 years old. The tomb is believed to belong to a military commander who might have served under the famous pharaoh Ramses III. The site has a burial chamber along with 3 additional rooms, and they found some pretty amazing artifacts there. There was a golden ring with the name of Ramses III on it, along with a bunch of bronze arrowheads and pottery vessels that were inscribed with the name of Pharaoh Horemheb, meaning that this tomb was probably reused over time, which was actually common in ancient Egypt, especially if a tomb became more well-known or valuable after its initial use. What makes this find so interesting is that it gives us a real look at life when Egypt was at its peak. The fact that they found artifacts linked to both Ramses III and Horemheb means the person buried here was probably pretty important. Maybe a top military leader or someone with close ties to the pharaohs. It also shows how connected Egypt's elite were and how much power the military had at the time. Basically, it's another clue in figuring out how ancient Egypt really worked. News of this next find in Texas is also super fresh. Archaeologists digging in the San Esteban rock shelter in Big Bend discovered a treasure trove of ancient weaponry. They found these ancient spear throwers called atlatls. They also found boomerangs. It's insane because it gives us a glimpse into how people were hunting and fighting way back in the day, and I mean before even bows and arrows. They also found some fossilized poop and a pronghorn hide that was carefully tanned. So not only do we get to imagine what these ancient hunters looked like, but now we know what they were eating as well. The best part is researchers planning to put together a full reconstruction of the weaponry, so soon we'll have a pretty good idea of how these ancient tools worked. In 2024, archaeologists in Mexico made a seriously strange discovery under the Temple of the Feathered Serpent at Teotihuacan. They found a tunnel with a miniature landscape. There were tiny mountains and pools of liquid mercury, all dating around 1800 years back. It's wild because liquid mercury isn't something you typically find in ancient sites, especially not in these kinds of quantities. But that's not all. They also found wooden masks detailed necklaces and hundreds of these tiny metal spheres, which is giving us a better idea of what the Teotihuacan people believed and how they practiced their rituals. Some experts think the Mercury and the mini landscape might represent the underworld, or maybe some kind of sacred connection to the gods. It shows how much the Teotihuacan culture was tied to the cosmos and their environment. What makes this find so important as well is that the Teotihuacan is one of the most powerful and mysterious civilizations in ancient Mexico, and this discovery just adds to the mystery. The use of mercury in rituals, which was considered sacred, gives us new insight into their spiritual life. A reminder that there's still just a lot about these ancient cultures we haven't begun to fully understand. In 2019, archaeologists discovered something pretty incredible in Byblos, Lebanon, a hidden Bronze Age necropolis. The site has 8 tombs cut into rock, connected by tunnels. It was found just outside the sacred Acropolis, meaning that it might have been connected to the nearby Temple of the Obelisks. The tombs themselves are pretty fascinating, but the real treasures are the artifacts they found inside. They dug up jewelry, pottery, and weapons. These items were beautiful and show just how skilled the craftsmen were back then, and as researchers keep digging, they're learning more about what life was really like there. In 2024, archaeologists dug up something crazy under Petra, the ancient city in Jordan. They found a hidden tomb with the remains of at least 12 people. It's about 2,000 years old, dating back to when the Nabateans were still around. The tomb gave researchers a peek at how the Nabateans buried their dead. The bodies were found in different positions, which could mean there was some kind of burial ritual involved. The tomb itself was carved straight into the rock, typical Nabatean style, and inside they found pottery, jewelry, and tools, probably stuff meant for the afterlife. The discovery is a big deal because it tells us more about how the Nabateans lived, what they believed, and how they dealt with all the different cultures that were passing through Petra. The artifacts found with the remains show how people from different backgrounds mixed in with the city, which was a major trade-off.
In ancient Rome, even fame came with blood. Carved into the walls of Pompey's amphitheater were inscriptions celebrating local gladiators, like a Roman version of fan accounts. One reads, "Salatius the Thracian makes the girls sigh." But alongside these adoring tributes are cruder images, depictions of savage wounds, mutilations, and even lists of kills. Some illustrations show men being impaled, others eaten alive by beasts. It's a window into the twisted entertainment of the time. These weren't just fights, they were bloodbaths cheered on by thousands. And the fact that fans immortalized these moments in stone speaks volumes about the violence Rome celebrated. You could become a celebrity in the arena, but only if you died well. A nail through the skull says one thing: someone wanted you dead. In a quiet English village near Broughton, a Roman-era skull was uncovered with an iron nail driven directly through its head. It was the first physical evidence in Britain of a Roman crucifixion or ritual execution. The placement and force weren't random, it was a targeted strike. This suggests the Romans in Britain may have used more than just the cross. It was brutal, final, and likely meant to send a message. No records survive of who this person was, but the nail remains over 1,800 years later, a rusted and permanent reminder of just how cold Roman justice could be. A cult, a god, and a hidden corpse. In 2017, excavations in central Rome led to a surprise discovery beneath a commercial building. A Mithraeum, or temple to the mysterious god Mithras. These underground temples were the meeting place of a secretive male-only cult, but in this one, archaeologists found something that didn't belong. A skeleton carefully buried beneath the altar. There are no words of who this person was or why they were buried there, but it wasn't standard practice. Some speculate it was a priest buried in honor, others believe it could have been a human sacrifice, though such rites were never openly acknowledged in Mithraic tradition. Either way, the body was meant to remain hidden until now, I guess. They didn't bury the heads, they displayed them. Near the old Roman road in Suffolk, England, a mass grave was discovered filled with decapitated bodies, all neatly lined up, but with their skulls placed between their knees or beside their hands. Most were healthy adult males, showing signs of sudden, clean cuts to the neck. Experts believe this wasn't battlefield carnage, it was execution. But here is what is truly disturbing. The skulls were carefully repositioned, almost as if arranged for effect. Some even believe the positioning was ritualistic. Whether punishment, sacrifice, or display, the site has become known as the Decapitator's Field, a chilling testament to how the Roman Empire turned death into a public message. Ancient Rome wasn't just an empire of law and order, it was also an empire of control, punishment, and secrecy. These artifacts aren't just remnants of the past, they're evidence of lives lived in fear, of rituals performed in shadow, and of cruelty carried out with precision. The deeper we dig, the darker it gets.
Deep under the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent in Mexico, archaeologists spent years painstakingly clearing a sealed tunnel. In 2015, they hit something they were never expecting to find: a massive deposit of liquid mercury sitting at the end of the corridor. A shimmering metallic pool that had been designed to look like a supernatural river. The lead archaeologist, Sergio Gomez, immediately went on the record warning that nobody should be near this stuff without full-body hazardous material suits and respirators. Liquid mercury is a neurotoxin that emits these odorless vapors that'll destroy the nervous system. If you breathe it in, you're looking at permanent brain damage, tremors, and eventually a complete system shutdown. So why was this here? The theory is that the ancient people of Teotihuacan used the mercury to represent an underworld river, creating a kind of forbidden zone for the living. Because the tunnel was sealed for nearly 1800 years though, the concentration of toxic fumes inside was lethal. Even today, the excavation is strictly controlled because the soil is just saturated with the metal. Next on the list is the Dalia Purple Sapphire. This artifact is currently sitting in a vault at the Natural History Museum in London, but for a long time, the people who owned it wished that they'd never come across it. It's not actually a sapphire, it's a massive amethyst that was looted from the Temple of Indra in India during the Indian Mutiny of 1857. A cavalry officer named W. Ferris brought it to England, and almost as soon as he arrived, his life took a turn for the worst. He lost his health, his money, and his family suffered a string of bizarre accidents. He eventually gave the stone to his son, who suffered the almost exact same streak of bad luck. The most famous owner was a writer named Edward Heron Allen. He was a man of science, but after several of his friends went through bouts of bad luck or just straight up died after handling the stone, he got terrified. So he tried to get rid of it by throwing it into a canal, only for a dredger to find it and return it to him months later. Heron Allen eventually packed the amethyst into 7 different boxes, surrounded it with lucky charms, and left instructions that should stay locked away until 33 years after his death. He warned that the stone was, quote, cursed and stained with blood. In 1973, a group of researchers in Poland decided to open the tomb of King Casimir IV Jagiellon. People at the time joking about the curse of the pharaohs, but the scientists were scientists. They didn't believe in curses, and even if there was some kind of dangerous mold in there, modern medicine would protect them from it, surely. But they were wrong. Within days of opening it, 4 of the 12 researchers were dead. Shortly after that, more members of the team started falling ill with mysterious lung infections and organ failure. In the end, nearly everyone who'd entered the tomb or handled the king's remains had suffered some form of serious health problem. Microbiologists eventually found that the tomb was a breeding ground for a specific fungus called Aspergillus flavus. When a tomb is sealed for hundreds and hundreds of years, like this one was, certain molds can evolve into highly concentrated toxic strains. So as soon as the researchers cracked the seal, it just inhaled a massive cloud of invisible spores that, and this is really disgusting, but they started eating their lungs from the inside out. So that's why nowadays, when archaeologists open a royal tomb or a sealed crypt of some kind, they wear a heavy-duty respirator. Back in 1785, archaeologists dug up a gold ring in a field in England. It's an undeniably ancient-looking thing, kind of bulky with a rough face carved into it. For a long time, people just thought it was an old Roman artifact, but then another discovery completely changed how people looked at it. Miles away from where the ring was found, researchers turned up what's called a cursed tablet at an ancient temple. It was left by a guy named Sylvanus, and he specifically called out the ring's owner by name, a man named Senecanius. The message basically asked the god Nodens to destroy Senecanius' health and peace of mind until he returned the ring to the temple. But it went even further than that. The tablet also warned anyone who came across the ring that it was stolen property and that whoever was wearing it was already marked for death. In 1929, an archaeologist named Mortimer Wheeler was trying to piece together the link between the ring and the cursed. He needed someone who understood the old mythology behind it, so he brought in a friend to help. And that friend was J.R.R. Tolkien. So this actual Roman ring, supposedly cursed and worn by someone essentially condemned, was a huge inspiration behind the One Ring in Lord of the Rings. The Black Prince's Ruby. This sits right in the middle of the British Crown Jewels, and it looks incredible, this massive deep red stone, but its history is basically just a long line of people dying violently. The stone was taken off a dead prince in 14th century Spain. The man who took it, Peter the Cruel, was warned straight away that it was tainted, brought betrayal to everyone who owned it. He didn't listen, and eventually he was slain by his own brother. Passed to an English nobleman known as the Black Prince, who died a slow and painful death from disease not long after. The stone kept moving, and it kept turning up at the worst moments for whoever had it. Henry V wore it in his helmet at the Battle of Agincourt. Someone hit him with a battle axe hard enough to crack the helmet open. Henry barely survived. Richard III had it on him when he died in battle. Today, it's mounted in the Imperial State Crown, behind thick glass in the Tower of London, with armed guards around it. In a town in southern Turkey, archaeologists think they may have just found the real coffin of the original St. Nicholas, the guy who inspired Santa Claus. The stone sarcophagus was found at the Church of St. Nicholas, which has been an excavation site since the late 80s. The limestone coffin is about 6 feet long, buried 5 feet down, and was found in a 2-story annex of the church. According to Associate Professor Ebru Fatma Fandik, that they didn't even realize they were digging into a burial site until animal bones and clay lamps started showing up. That's when they hit the sarcophagus. St. Nicholas died in 343 and was buried at this site. Later, a grander church was built over it under Emperor Theodosius II, and that's when his remains were supposedly moved into this sarcophagus. In 1087, a group of sailors from Bari, Italy, broke into his tomb and took most of his bones back to their city. They placed them in a new shrine at the Basilica di San Nicola, where they're still kept today. But not all the bones were taken. During the First Crusade, around 1099, another group, this time from Venice, raided what was left of the tomb and took the remaining bones. So, in 1953, scientists confirmed that the bones from both cities came from the same person, but whether that's actually St. Nick is still up for debate. At the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, one of the most sacred places in Christianity, archaeologists recently found something that had been sitting in plain sight for centuries. It's a massive stone altar from the Crusader period, dating back to the 1100s. For years, people thought it was just part of the wall, mostly because it was covered in layers of graffiti and chunks of fallen stone. But once researchers took a closer look, they realized that this thing had been deliberately carved and set in place as part of the original Crusader structure. It's built from massive limestone blocks, including one with a cross carved right into it. According to archaeologist David Gurvich, we've talked about a place where people believe Jesus was buried, so to uncover part of a forgotten altar from the Crusader period is huge. It had been partially destroyed over time, and a lot of it was buried under hundreds of years' worth of rubble. In Reading, England, a church relic resurfaced that people thought was lost forever. A mummified human hand said to belong to St. James the Apostle. It originally came from Reading Abbey, a huge medieval monastery founded in 1121 by King Henry I. During the 1500s, when King Henry VIII shut down England's monasteries and looted them, a lot of relics disappeared. Somehow this one survived though. It was hidden inside an iron box and rediscovered centuries later by workers doing repairs. Eventually, it made its way to St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church in Marlow, where it stayed locked away for years. The hand was, of course, dried and shriveled and partially wrapped in fabric, but it was still clearly human. Went back on display briefly in 2018 before being sent to be studied. Experts can't 100% prove it belonged to James the Apostle, but based on its age, the location, and how relics were handled at the time, it fits. In 2002, a collector went public with a limestone bone box known as an ossuary that had an inscription scratched into the side: James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. If it's legit, that's a huge deal. It would be the only known artifact that actually names Jesus of Nazareth. The box itself is real, dates back to the 1st century. Experts checked the aging on the stone, the weathering and the letters, all of it, but big question was whether the inscription was added much later to, boost its value. That started one of the longest and most expensive court battles in archaeology. The Israeli Antiquities Authority charged the owner with forgery. The whole thing turned into a circus. After years of trial, the charges were dropped. The science couldn't prove the inscription was fake. Some people still doubt it, but no one's been able to say for sure it's modern. In 2023, archaeologists in Germany found something strange in a Roman-era grave. A silver scroll buried with a man who died nearly 1800 years before. When they carefully unrolled the scroll, they found it was inscribed with 18 lines of Greek writing, including the names of Jesus, Mary, and several Christian saints. That alone was wild, because this was found in Frankfurt, way north of where Christianity was thought to have spread at the time. The guy was buried sometime between 230 and 270 CE, which means Christians were already up there way earlier than anyone thought, about 100 years ahead of the usual timeline. Researchers say the writing on the scroll was meant to act like a charm or spiritual protection. The scroll itself is tiny, just a few inches long, and was buried in an iron capsule next to the man's remains. According to archaeologist Dr. Erwin Emmerling, this is the earliest physical evidence of Christianity in this region, and it changes what we thought we knew about how fast it spread.
In late 2022, archaeologists excavating the Tomiyu Maruyama burial mound in Nara, Japan, found a sword that immediately looked wrong. It was an iron dako sword from the Kofun period, roughly the late 4th century, and it was around 2.3 meters long, about 7.5 feet. Too large to be a normal weapon, too awkward for actual combat. Experts believe it was likely ceremonial, possibly placed in the tomb to protect the dead from evil spirits. And that is where it gets unsettling. This was not just a sword, it was a spiritual barrier. Alongside it, archaeologists also found a massive bronze mirror, another object with ritual importance in ancient Japan. So whoever was buried here was not just given valuables, they were sealed with a giant serpent-shaped blade and a sacred mirror. Officially, that means protection, but protection from what? When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it destroyed Pompeii and buried nearby Herculaneum, preserving something almost impossible, an ancient Roman library. Hundreds of scrolls were carbonized by heat and turned into black, brittle cylinders that looked more like burned wood than books. So when they were discovered in the 1700s, people tried to open them, but that usually destroyed them. So for centuries, experts were stuck with one of the greatest archaeological prizes ever found, while also being warned not to physically unroll it. Today, scientists are using X-rays and artificial intelligence to virtually read them without touching them, and they have started recovering words sealed for nearly 2,000 years. But the warning still stands. One wrong move could erase a lost ancient text forever. These scrolls survived a volcanic eruption. The thing that may finally destroy them is human curiosity. In 2023, researchers studying a cave near the Dead Sea were examining an ancient inscription when they found a hidden crevice. Inside were 4 Roman swords and the head of a javelin, preserved for roughly 1,900 years. The wooden and leather parts were still there, which almost never happens with weapons this old. The leading theory is that Jewish rebels captured them from Roman soldiers, then hid them in the cave for later use. But later use never came. The swords remained there untouched behind rock and darkness, like a war cache frozen in time. Experts were already surveying these caves, partly because looters have been destroying ancient sites in the Judea desert. So the warning here is practical, not supernatural. These objects survived rebellion, empire, and 2,000 years underground. The real danger was people finding them before archaeologists did. In Egypt's Saqqara necropolis, the tomb of Kentika dates back to more than 4,000 years to the Old Kingdom. Kentika was a high-ranking official, and his tomb contained rare carved scenes connected to the Egyptian calendar. But the tomb also carried something more ominous, an ancient warning inscription against anyone who desecrated it. This was not a modern mummy curse invented by newspapers. Ancient Egyptians really did place warnings on tombs to protect the dead and the sacred space. Then, in 2025, officials confirmed that a limestone painting had vanished from Kentika's tomb. Someone had entered a tomb with an ancient warning on it, removed a 4,000-year-old relief, and walked out. The real issue is theft and damage, obviously, but the symbolism is hard to ignore. The tomb warned people not to violate it, and thousands of years later, someone did exactly that. I don't know, man, the threat of a curse is definitely enough for me to stay away. Ancient Greek curse tablets were usually thin sheets of lead scratched with tiny writing, folded, pierced, buried, or thrown into wells and graves. They were not decorations, they were ritual weapons. Some cursed business rivals, some targeted lovers, some tried to silence witnesses in court. Archaeologists have even found lead figurines with their hands tied behind their back, sealed inside containers with curses written against the people they represented. That is what makes these objects so strange to study. They were not meant to be read by us. They were hidden underground because the people who made them believed the dead, the gods, or the underworld would receive them. Modern experts study them as evidence of ancient language, religion, fear, and conflict, but every time one is opened and translated, it also means a private act of ancient magic has been disturbed. This is a tiny remote island in northern Russia, and scattered across it are 14 stone labyrinths. These aren't small garden mazes. Some are over 40 feet across, made of carefully placed boulders arranged in perfect spirals. They're estimated to be up to 3,000 years old, and nobody, absolutely nobody, knows who built them or why. The local tradition: you don't enter them. They're considered thresholds to the underworld, places where spirits dwell. And here's the thing, archaeologists can't even agree on what they were used for. Some say ritual, some say fish traps, which makes absolutely zero sense, some say portals. What I do know is that people still visit the island today and come back with stories about feeling watched while walking the spirals. Take from that what you will. In 1961, 3 rock hunters were out in the mountains of California when they found a geode, a round, crystal-lined rock that takes hundreds of thousands of years to form. They cut it open, and inside was a spark plug, a 1920s champion spark plug, encased in rock that a geologist estimated was 500,000 years old. Now look, I know, the obvious answer here is that the geologist was wrong, or the rock wasn't as old as they thought, or it wasn't a real geode. But the people who found it, they weren't conspiracy theorists, they were just guys looking for rocks, and the artifact has never been properly debunked to the satisfaction of everyone. The spark plug still exists, you can see it, and the question remains, how does a piece of 20th century technology end up inside a rock that was supposedly formed 500,000 years before humans walked the earth? I don't know. I genuinely don't know, and that's the kind of thing that keeps me up. In 1933, a Mexican archaeologist named Jose Garcia Payan was excavating a burial site near Toluca, Mexico. He dug through 3 intact pyramid floors, sealed, undisturbed layers, and found a burial offering. Inside it was a small terracotta head. And here's the problem. It doesn't look Mesoamerican. It looks Roman. Bearded, European features, Roman-style hair, found in a tomb that predates Columbus by, well, a while. If this head is authentic, and it was found beneath 3 sealed floors, so something would have had to go very wrong for it to be planted, it means Romans or someone from the Mediterranean reached the Americas over 1,000 years before anyone was supposed to be here. Mainstream archaeology has largely dismissed it. The suggestion that it was planted by a jealous colleague has been floated, but the artifact is real. The burial was sealed, and nobody's come up with a satisfactory mystery explanation that doesn't involve rewriting history. If you thought a Roman head in Mexico was weird, wait until you hear this one. Near a lake in Bolivia, a massive stone bowl was discovered in the 1950s. It's covered in carvings. On one side, typical Andean imagery, animals, human figures. On the other side is Sumerian cuneiform, writing from ancient Mesopotamia, on a bowl found in South America. And it gets stranger because the cuneiform was actually translated. The inscriptions are apparently a prayer to a Sumerian goddess, in a language that shouldn't exist anywhere near the Andes. The academic community has mostly refused to engage with this artifact. It's been called a hoax, a misinterpretation, a weird coincidence, but nobody's been able to explain how or why a fake would have authentic Sumerian script that can actually be read. And the bowl just sits there in a museum in Bolivia, largely ignored by the people who should be most interested. Isn't history fun? In 1992, a villager in China's Zhejiang province drained what he thought was a pond. It wasn't a pond, it was actually the entrance to a massive underground complex. 24 chambers carved entirely by human hands, covering over 30,000 square meters. These aren't natural caves. Every wall, ceiling, and pillar has precise, uniform chisel marks. 60-degree angles, evenly spaced, running parallel across the entire surface. Here is what makes this genuinely baffling. There is no record of who built these. None. China has 3,000 years of meticulous written history, and nobody thought to mention 24 massive underground chambers? No tools were found, no construction debris, not a single artifact that explains who did this or why. The caves are open to visitors now, but the sheer scale of the mystery and the fact that we still have no answers after 3 decades of study has led some researchers to suggest that maybe we shouldn't be opening every chamber just yet. There are things underground that were hidden for a reason, I'm just saying. This is often called the oldest known star map in the world, a bronze disc inlaid with gold showing the sun, the moon, and the Pleiades star cluster. It is 3,600 years old, and it was discovered by treasure hunters with metal detectors, who then sold it on the black market, who were then caught in a police sting operation in a Swiss hotel. So right from the start, this whole discovery is a mess. And because of that, the Nebra sky disk has been at the center of a brutal academic war for years. One camp says it's authentic, a Bronze Age masterpiece. The other camp says it's 1,000 years younger than claimed, or possibly just a complete forgery. Both sides have published papers calling each other wrong. There have been lawsuits, there have been accusations of research manipulation, and through all of this, the disk just sits there, behind glass, one of Germany's most prized cultural treasures. But here's the thing, if it is real, it rewrites what we know about Bronze Age astronomy. If it's fake, it's one of the most elaborate archaeological frauds in history, and the fighting over it has gotten so ugly that some people in the field quietly wish the treasure hunters had never dug it up at all. I'm just saying, if I found an ancient artifact with my little beep beep metal detector, I'm not selling it on the black market, okay? I'm gonna become an archaeologist. This is my one shot.
This story goes back to 15th century Italy. A silver vase was given to a young bride as a wedding gift. That same night, she was found dead, still clutching it. After that, the vase disappeared for hundreds of years. It turned up at an auction in 1988. When someone opened it, there was a handwritten note inside that said, "Beware, this vase brings death." The man who brought it ignored that and was dead within 3 months. The family sold it to a pharmacist who also died shortly after, and now the thing had a bit of a reputation. People tried donating it to museums just to get it out of their hands, and every museum refused. Nobody wanted this thing. Eventually, the Italian police got involved, and since they couldn't find a home for it, they reportedly put it in a lead-lined box and buried it somewhere. Tikal is one of the most visited ancient sites in the world. Tourists go constantly to see the Maya pyramids, but archaeologists started getting sick after spending time in the deeper chambers. For a while, nobody could work out why. But when they finally tested the air and the surfaces, they found unsafely high levels of mercury. The source, the paint on the walls. See, the Maya were obsessed with the color red. It represented life and the BLOOD of their gods. The mineral they used to get that deep red was called cinnabar. The problem is that cinnabar is mercury sulfide. They coated their walls with it, their pottery, even the bodies of their dead. Over 1,000 years later, that paint is broken down into this fine dust that covers every surface in those chambers. So breathe it in or touch the wrong wall, you could end up with mercury poisoning. This limestone statue was carved in Cyprus around 3500 BCE. It's officially known as the Woman from Lem's statue, but some call it the Goddess of Death, and the history behind it makes that pretty easy to understand. It was discovered in the late 1800s. The first owner was a man named Lord Elfont. Within 7 years of bringing it home, every member of this dude's family was dead, all 7 of them. The next owner, Ivor Manusci, lost his entire family within 4 years. The third owner had a nearly identical experience. And by the time it reached a fourth owner, Sir Noel Thompson, the stories were well known. He was aware of everything that had happened to the people before him. His wife and 2 daughters still died after the statue came into his home. Surviving sons, not wanting to find out what had happened next, donated it to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh. The museum placed it in a display case. The curator, who handled the installation, died shortly after. It's still there today behind thick glass. You can go see it if you'd ever want to, but the staff and historians who studied it are generally in the same agreement that it should stay exactly where it is. Uluru is this huge sandstone rock sitting in the middle of Australia. The Anangu people have considered it sacred for thousands of years, and their message to visitors has always been, don't take the rocks. If you do, things won't go well for you. Well, for years, tourists have ignored that and took stones home as souvenirs. But packages started arriving. The Park Service receives returned rocks every single week from people all over the world. They're called sari rocks, and they almost always come with a letter. The letters describe the same kinds of things: car accidents, illnesses, marriages falling apart, financial problems, all seeming to start around the time the person took the rock. Returning the rock may seem like a small gesture, but this is Australia. Shipping something down there, it ain't cheap, but people are so desperate to undo their bad luck that they will pay it. And in a similar story, in 1995, someone stole 2 large round stones from an archaeological site in Israel called Gamla. They were Roman ballista stones, which were heavy ammunition used in ancient catapults. These ones were from a siege in 67 CE, where a massive number of people were killed. For 20 years after they were taken, nobody knew where they went, but then they just showed up, left in a bag in the courtyard of an Israeli museum with a typed note inside. The person who took them wrote about what the 2 decades since had looked like for them. Their business had completely failed, their family had left. They described a constant feeling of impending doom, and what did they blame it on? The stones, of course. They said the stones had brought them nothing but trouble, and that they were cursed by the blood of everyone who died at Gamla.
In 1965, archaeologists excavating a waterlogged tomb in Hubei, China, found a bronze sword inside a wooden scabbard. It had been buried for more than 2,000 years in conditions that would have damaged it badly. But when the sword was removed, the blade was still almost untarnished and still sharp. The inscription identified it as the sword of Gojian, king of Wei, and it became legendary because its preservation seemed almost impossible. But here is the part that feels like a warning. In 1994, while the sword was on loan in Singapore, it was accidentally damaged, leaving a tiny crack in the blade. After that, China reportedly stopped allowing it to leave the country, which, fair enough. It survived over 2,000 years underground, then modern handling damaged it in seconds. Again, classic. The ancient Hittite capital of Hattusa in modern Turkey, there is a polished green stone sitting among the ruins of a once powerful Bronze Age empire. The Hittites left behind temples, walls, gates, carvings, and thousands of tablets, so we know a lot about their laws, their wars, and their gods. But nobody has fully explained this green stone. It has no inscription telling us what it was. Some believe it may have had ritual significance. Visitors often touch it and treat it like something powerful, while archaeologists are much more cautious. Officially, its purpose is uncertain, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes it unsettling. In a city full of written records, one of the most memorable objects is something nobody can explain. In 2018, construction workers in Alexandria, Egypt, uncovered a massive black granite sarcophagus buried underground. It was nearly 9 feet long, sealed with mortar, and did not appear to have been opened by looters. The internet immediately warned officials not to open it, half joking that nobody needed to unleash whatever was inside. Archaeologists opened it anyway. Inside were 3 skeletons submerged in dark, red-brown sewage water that had leaked into the coffin over time. There was no royal mummy, no ancient monster, no world-ending curse, just human remains, a horrible smell, and a very strange burial scene. The terracotta army is famous, but the actual tomb of China's first emperor is still sealed. The soldiers, horses, and weapons are only part of the larger mausoleum complex. The central burial chamber has never been excavated. Ancient historians describe the tomb as an underground palace filled with rare treasures, crossbow traps, and rivers of mercury representing the waterways of the world. For a long time, that sounded like legend, but then modern testing found unusually high mercury levels around the tomb mound. That does not prove every ancient detail is literal, but it is enough for experts to take the danger seriously. There is also the preservation problem. When the terracotta warriors were exposed to air, their paint began flaking away almost immediately. So the tomb remains closed, not because experts cannot find it, but because opening it too soon could destroy whatever is inside. Across the ancient Mediterranean, people buried written objects with the dead. Thin metal sheets, lead texts, ritual instructions, magical formulas, names of gods, enemies, spirits, and protective forces. Some were meant to guide the dead, some were meant to protect them, others were meant to harm or control the living. What makes these objects unsettling is that they were not created for public display. The secrecy was part of the ritual. So when archaeologists unfold, scan, translate, and publish these objects, they are recovering history, but also breaking the original boundary around the object. Maybe that is the real warning behind all of these discoveries. Not that every ancient object is cursed, but the past has limits. And sometimes the more powerful an object feels, the more careful we should be before deciding we have the right to open it.
In 2023, construction crews were doing work near an old Dominican monastery in Poland when they cracked open something really cool, a medieval knight's tomb. It had a massive stone slab with a full carving of a knight in armor, sword, shield, all of it. When archaeologists lifted it, there was a skeleton laid out perfectly underneath, exactly where you'd expect him to be. The carving was done on limestone from Gotland, which is a Swedish island. The knight was tall, probably someone important, and this grave was built to show it. The carving had symbols like a coat of arms, so whoever buried him wanted people to know exactly who he was, or at least that he was worth remembering. The area used to be a church cemetery way back in the 12th century, and this tomb probably dates to the 1200s or 1300s. And fun fact, the whole thing was under what used to be an ice cream shop. So the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is supposed to be the spot where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. It's one of the most famous religious sites in the world, but while restoring part of the floor, researchers found something small but weirdly important: ancient seeds. They dug down and found traces of grape seeds, olive pits, and pollen buried in the soil under the church. Now, that doesn't sound all that exciting, but those plants match up with the gospel descriptions of a garden being nearby at the time of the crucifixion. Grapes and olives were big in that region, especially for things like wine and oil used in rituals, so finding that kind of evidence under the building is kind of cool. The seeds were found in layers that date back about 2,000 years, so the timeline lines up as well. Doesn't prove every detail of the story, obviously, but it's enough to make archaeologists pretty excited. Right near the southern wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, archaeologists were digging in a spot known as the Opal, and ended up finding a stash of Byzantine gold. They found a small stash of gold buried in the floor, like actual treasure. There were 36 gold coins, a gold bar, 2 earrings, and a round medallion engraved with a menorah, a Torah scroll, and a shofar. That medallion is cool because it's Jewish imagery, but it was found in a Christian-era building. The coins date back to around the early 600s, right before the Persian army rolled through the city, so it looks like someone buried their valuables before things got ugly and just never made it back. It sat undisturbed for 1,400 years. The fact that Jewish religious symbols were found inside a Christian-era home also shows that this part of the city wasn't strictly divided. People were living close together, even if they didn't believe the same things, and all that info came from a handful of gold buried in someone's floor. Archaeologists digging in northern Ethiopia found the ruins of a 4th century Christian church. It's the oldest one discovered so far in sub-Saharan Africa. The site's called Beta Samati, and it used to be part of the Aksumite Empire, a big trade hub back in the day. The church was built in basilica style with stone walls, columns, and a central platform that lines up with early Christian designs from the Roman world. Found crosses, ceramic incense burners, carved pendants, a gold ring with a bull's head on it. That ring probably came from somewhere outside Ethiopia, maybe traded in from Jordan or Arabia. There were also dozens of small animal figurines, mostly of cattle, scattered around the site. Inscriptions found inside mention Christ by name, which is a big deal considering how early this site is. This means Christianity had, of course, already reached this part of Africa by the early 300s, so way earlier than most people thought. The area was connected to trading routes that stretched all the way to the Middle East. So ideas, goods, and religions were constantly flowing through. And in 2021, archaeologists working in northern Jordan explored an old underground church built inside a cave, and inside it, they came across a tiny lead scroll covered in ancient writing. The church had been carved into the rock and might be one of the earliest places where Christians gathered in secret. The scroll was tightly rolled, only about the size of a matchstick, so they had to scan it with high-res imaging to even read what was inside. The writing's in ancient Hebrew, and even though some of it still hasn't been fully decoded, early scans showed names linked to Jesus and what might be early Christian symbols. The scroll might have been used like a prayer or a kind of protective charm, something people back then would have kept hidden from Roman authorities, which is why this was found buried under the church's altar. Researchers are still being cautious about dating it, but think it could push back written references to early Christianity by decades, maybe even from the 1st century. If that's the case, this could be one of the earliest written traces of Christianity outside of Jerusalem.
Scattered across the hills of northern Laos are thousands of massive stone jars. Some of them are over 10 feet tall. So when I say massive, I mean massive. Some weigh several tons. They're believed to be part of an ancient burial practice dating back to the Iron Age. But here's the thing, you can't just walk up and study them, because this region is still full of unexploded bombs. I bet you weren't expecting me to say that. Between 1964 and 1973, the United States dropped over 270 million cluster bombs on Laos, making it the most heavily bombed country per capita in human history. And tens of millions of those bombs never detonated. They are still there in the ground around the jars. So archaeologists who want to study this site have to work with bomb disposal teams. Every step is calculated. Every new excavation risks finding a jar or triggering a decades-old explosive. What a fun game. The Plain of Jars is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most dangerous archaeological landscapes on the planet. The warning here isn't ancient, it's modern, and it's still very, very real. In 1993, archaeologists excavating a Neolithic lake settlement in northern Greece pulled a wooden tablet out of the mud. It was covered in linear markings, symbols carved into the wood, and when they radiocarbon dated it, the results came back at roughly 5,260 BC. That makes this tablet potentially the oldest known example of writing in Europe, thousands of years older than the earliest Mesopotamian writing systems. So why haven't you heard of it? Because the tablet cannot be exposed to air. The moment it's removed from the anaerobic conditions of the lake bed, it begins to deteriorate. It has to be kept submerged, which means studying it is nearly impossible without potentially destroying it. There is writing on this tablet, we know that much, but what it says, what knowledge a 7,000-year-old European civilization chose to preserve, remains locked in wood that would crumble if we tried to read it. And that, to me, is one of the most frustrating mysteries in all of archaeology. But I'm glad we're leaving it there, okay? I'm glad we are protecting it. This is a 5,000-year-old underground temple in Malta, carved entirely from solid rock 3 levels deep. It was discovered accidentally in 1902 when construction workers broke through the ceiling, and what they found inside reshaped everything we thought we knew about prehistoric Malta. Over 7,000 bodies were buried here, and a portion of the skulls recovered showed extreme elongation, not through binding, but naturally formed, which has led to decades of debate about who exactly these people were. But the most unsettling feature of the hypogeum is the oracle chamber, a small niche carved into the wall that, when you speak into it in a deep voice, amplifies the sound to echo through the entire complex. Every chamber, every level, like the entire temple was designed around this one spot. Today, only 80 people per day are allowed inside. The microclimate is tightly controlled, the wait list is months long, and honestly, after hearing about the echoes and the elongated skulls and the 7,000 bodies in the dark, maybe a limited capacity isn't the worst thing. Standing in a quiet field in southern Sweden is a 9th century granite stone covered in 700 runes. It's the longest runic inscription in the world. For centuries, scholars thought it was a memorial, a tribute to a dead son. But in 2020, a team of researchers from 3 Swedish universities proposed a completely new translation, and what they found was genuinely chilling. According to their reading, the rock runestone isn't a memorial, it's a warning. The inscription describes a coming climate catastrophe. 3 years without summer, the sky turning red, the sun being swallowed. It references a solar storm that occurred in 536 AD that turned the sky blood red and caused crops to fail across the northern hemisphere. And the author of this stone seems to have believed it was coming again, that the end of the world was already in motion. The Vikings, the people we think of as fearless warriors, were apparently so terrified of an impending climate apocalypse that they carved a 700 rune warning into a 5-ton stone. And now, 1,200 years later, we're reading it in our own era of red skies and failing crops. I don't know, guys. Maybe some warnings aren't meant for their time. Maybe they're meant for the people who dig them up later.